Story 1, a DNA test is destroying my life. I'd always been interested in getting a DNA test done. The family history and tree is something that has always difficult to do on Dad's side of the family. According to family legend, the first family member to come to Australia was on the First Fleet, 7 years for larceny, stealing a silk handkerchief, and the rest was filled with roughens and nardoo-wells, the kind of thing Australians are weirdly proud of. We had known that most of our ancestry had come from Europe and not just Ireland and England, but when and how was never anything we could really nail down in the family's oral history, and I figured that a DNA test would give me an idea of where and when my ancestors came to Australia, and by ticking the share box I figured that I could connect in with other people's family tree work. I ordered the test and did the swabs, filled out the forms and sent them back and just waited. I had forgotten about the test when I received notification that it had been completed and that I could log in and see my ancestry breakdown and parts of the family tree that had been added. I log in and read the breakdown and confirmed that I'm a mutt of mixed ancestry and that most of the migrations probably happened later than the family history would have to believe. I clicked the link to the family tree, and that is where it gets weird. In the form I was able to list my parents and grandparents as starters for the family tree and find that my dad has already had a DNA test done and we aren't related by DNA, but I find that I have a half-sibling and that she is 10 years younger than I am. If I don't share my dad's DNA with this woman and my mom wasn't pregnant when I was 9 to 10 years old, the only conclusion that I can come to is that I have been adopted. I send the woman a message on the site regarding her being my half-sister and that I would like to meet her and that we share a mom and if she knew who that was. I've been researching adoption in Victoria, the state where my birth certificate was issued, as to my adoption, but so far nothing had come up yet and I haven't heard back from the woman yet. Let's call her Kate. My dad's long passed and my mom isn't in the best of health and my brother is currently doing time in jail. I was born in the 70s, almost 50 years ago, and that's when dodgy shit used to happen, and I'm wondering what else has been hidden from me and who am I really. I always felt different from my family. I don't know what else to say and I'm just rambling at this point, and I feel like everything I know is in the hands of bureaucracy and a woman I didn't know existed until a few days ago. I don't know where to even start a conversation with my mom, and the rest of the family has always shunned me as the black sheep. I'm just sitting alone in my house. I don't know what's next and or how to even face tomorrow. A quick roundup: did a DNA test. My dad isn't my bio father. My mom may have cheated. Thanks Reddit. I have a half sister. I think I've been adopted. I haven't talked to anyone outside of Reddit about this, probably a mistake. Let's rip the band-aid off. The adoptions people can't find me in the system and that I've never been adopted and that my parents are my parents. They did mention that it might have been a church adoption and that they weren't so legal sometime and I should look into their church. My mom hates all churches a lot. When I was a curious kid I wanted to go to church, but my mom gave me a talking to that I still remember and has in itself given me a hatred of all organized religions. When my mom was about 15 she lost her mom during the birth of her little brother, and the priest had told her dad that they need to get the baby baptized or it would go to hell. My mom told the priest to fuck off. If nothing is more innocent than a child that died during birth, shouldn't the most innocent automatically get to heaven? There was definitely no religion, so when visiting my mom I mentioned that I had sent away to get a DNA test done and that I was looking forward to doing it to figure out my ancestry of if I'd been secretly adopted. Mom called me a dickhead, of course I was hers, and that DNA tests are unreliable and that I shouldn't waste my money on it. We already knew about the medical conditions we had to watch out for and that I should be focusing on those future problems than digging through the past. The fact Mom only mentioned that I was hers and not Dad's, maybe Reddit is right, as well, was enough to send me into a panic attack. I was barely holding it together. I just shut down and did all I could do to get out of the end to make it home. Still no word from Kate, but it looks like it's been months since she was last on the site, so that might just eventuate into nothing. I know less than I did before, but I'm sure that my mom knows more about this than she is letting on. Dad took what he knew to the grave, and while I don't want Mom to do the same, but I don't want this to be the reason why she goes toes up either. I don't know how I'm going to move forward with this. Suggestions could be helpful. Story 2, losing my brother. I've had the worst few weeks, but it's been even worse for my 13-year-old niece, Alice. 5 weeks ago, I lost my brother, Aaron, and his wife, Taylor, in a fatal car accident. My 13-year-old niece went from being a happy child one day to an orphan the next. The painful task of telling her fell to me. I have a special bond with my niece. She's an IT nerd like her uncle. It was heartbreaking to see her go from a smiling girl to a sobbing mess. She cried in my arms until she fell asleep. Aaron was my younger brother, but I always looked up to him. He had a way with people, always willing to help whenever he could. Always ready to talk if needed. If he said he would do something, you could be sure it would be done. I took Alice home with me, and the following week, my parents arranged the funeral. A few days after, we had a family meeting to discuss Alice's future, who would take care of her, and what official steps needed to be taken. I am very successful in my field, child-free by choice. I'm currently single. While I never saw myself as a parent, I will never be able to replace Erin. But I can be the uncle who takes care of her. My parents are willing to take Alice in. They are retired but well off, not rich, but better than average. They have raised 2 wonderful sons. I believe they can raise my niece, but I also believe they deserve to enjoy retirement and have the role of grandparents, not primary caregivers. The options were me or my parents. I love my niece and wanted what was best for her, so I told my parents I wanted to take care of her. After some back and forth, we decided that I would take Alice in. They were fully supportive, offering to help wherever they could. My sister-in-law was an orphan, so there was no family on her side who could take Alice in. Alice has been staying with me since her parents' death. A week after the funeral, I started taking her back to school, trying to restore some normalcy in her life. We went to my brother's house to gather her belongings and move them into my place. My parents handled my brother's estate and took care of anything of sentimental value. Alice has access to everything from her parents. Since Alice is the sole heir, she now owns the house, but because of her age, she needs a legal guardian. That's when we decided I would adopt her. Of course, we discussed it with Alice first. Then things took a turn. We started the formal adoption process. In my country, in cases like this, the biological family has the first right to adopt a child. Naturally, we had to do a DNA test to prove Alice and I are related. It seemed straightforward. She's the daughter of my brother, so we are blood related. And then we found out. Alice and I are not blood related. I can't adopt her. When we found out that my niece is not related to me, everything became confusing. How could the daughter of my brother not be related to me? First things first. I contacted a lawyer. There must have been a mistake. We repeated the test, and the result was the same. Biologically, my niece and I are not related. With the help of the lawyer, we obtained my brother and his wife's medical records and secured a subpoena to test their DNA against Alice's. Alice is Taylor's daughter, but not Erin's. How was this possible? Was Alice conceived through a donor? My parents knew nothing about that. So we delved into their medical files. There was no evidence of anything like that. As far as the OBGYN knew, Alice was the daughter of Taylor and Erin. But DNA doesn't lie. She is not my brother's biological daughter. After some back and forth, my mother finally said what we were all thinking. Is it possible that Taylor cheated on Erin? It's possible, but how do we find out? We can't confront Taylor, and it happened 14 years ago. And unless you have a sample to compare it to, a DNA test is meaningless. Now the legal trouble. For custody of Alice, we have a judge who follows the law strictly. Alice's biological family has the first right to adopt. So we have to find him and get him to relinquish that right before I can adopt Alice. Even with all the evidence we presented, the judge refuses to change the process. And here's the worst part, because I and my parents are not biologically related to Alice, she is not allowed to stay with us while we search for the biological father. Southwest, the court took Alice from me and placed her in the foster system until we find the biological family or until a year has passed. That day was one of the worst experiences of my life. I refused to let her go and the police was called. Alice was taken away while I was held back by 2 police officers. My niece has no choice but to be strong. 3 months ago, she lost her parents, and in the process of me adopting her, we discovered she is not biologically related to me. She is not my brother's daughter. We don't know for sure, but it seems my late sister-in-law cheated on my brother and had Alice. But that means the unknown biological father and his family have the first right to adopt her, and I have to wait until he relinquishes his rights or for a year to pass. In the meantime, Alice is in the foster system. I've been doing everything I can to stay updated on Alice's whereabouts. I bought her a phone, and we both secured it. She was the only one who could use it, and I paid for the phone plan. Since the phone is in my name, I'm allowed to track it. As long as Alice has her phone, I'll know where she is. And in case she loses her phone, we created a webmail address so she can contact me if we lose track of her. For the past 2 months, we've been texting, and she's been telling me how she's being treated. It's not good. Here's the frustrating part, legally, I have no rights to interfere and improve my niece's life. The phone is the only thing they allowed. The search for her biological dad is frustrating. We don't know where to start. We can't just round up all of Taylor's male friends, acquaintances, and coworkers we know and ask them for a DNA test. So we have to dig into her history to find out who it could be. Who was she close to 14 years ago? Alice is struggling. She knows Aaron is not her biological father and she has a hard time with her feelings towards her mother. Her whole life she has seen her parents loving each other, there was no sign there was anyone else. She loved her mother but doesn't know how to feel now that she knows. She still loves her father even if he is not her biological father. She knows we still love her and are fighting for her. My parents also have a hard time with all of it. They are angry with Taylor. Because of her actions, their grandchild is in this situation. Like me, they are texting her daily and calling me to ask for updates. I love them and I understand, but sometimes it's a little too much. I have to tell them every day that I don't have an update. It breaks me every time I have to do that. We still need to find the biological dad or wait 10 more months until I have the right to adopt Alice. And while my parents and I are struggling, this is worse for Alice. She is strong. She learned that from Aaron. To her he will always be her father. I'm not giving up. I love my niece, and she needs her uncle. 2 months ago, my niece's phone went offline. 24 hours after it went offline, I drove to its last known location. My niece's phone is in my name, so I could report it stolen. This gave me reason to go to the last location with a police officer. After a lot of back and forth, the phone was handed over to me. But Alice wasn't there. Where was my niece? All they could tell me is that she was picked up by the foster system a few days ago. She was brought to another foster home. When I asked why, they deflected. And that is where the foster system was very unhelpful. Because I have no rights, they refused to help me. I got my lawyer involved, but that didn't help much. After 2 weeks of no contact, I got an email from Alice. She gave me the address of her new foster home. She begged me to come get her. I raced to the new location. I know it didn't help my case much, but I had to be there for my niece. I barged into the home, and as soon as I saw Alice, I took her in my arms and ran with her outside. No, I didn't take her away. I just wanted her out of that house. It was terrible in there. I was holding her and verbally fighting the foster father until the cops arrived and separated us. Luckily, the officers had a sympathetic ear. I got them to talk to Alice about her living situation. I gave Alice her phone back. I looked at the foster father and said, "That phone is my property. If you take it away from her, I will report it stolen, and I will be back." My impulsive action did have some good results. The foster family was investigated and they were shut down. Alice was moved to another foster family, and these people are good people. While I have no rights according to the law, these people allow me to visit Alice. And they did allow me to take her out and spend the day with her. I couldn't let her sleep over, she had to be back before dark. But it was good to take Alice to visit my parents. The search for her biological dad has stopped, we have no leads anymore. Unless someone in her biological family does the 23andMe test, we have no idea how to find them. It looks like we have to wait 6 more months before I can adopt my niece. 2 months ago, I adopted Alice successfully. The mystery of why Alice is not my brother's has been solved. And it is not what we thought, it is worse. I was out with a group of friends, honoring and celebrating Aaron's birthday. Alice was spending the night at her grandparents'. Some of these friends included mutual friends of mine, Aaron and Taylor. In the conversation, I must have said something nasty about Taylor. I honestly don't remember. Later that evening, a friend of Taylor took me aside. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She told me not to be angry at Taylor. I asked her what she knew, and she told me it would be better if I read it in Taylor's words. Taylor had a journal, I should look for it. I didn't remember seeing a journal. But this friend was adamant it should be somewhere Taylor would feel it was safe. The next morning, I went to Aaron's home to look through the last things. After searching for an hour, I found Taylor's journal. It was in Aaron's safe. The combination was Alice's birthday backwards. I waited until Alice was asleep to read it. The journal was not a normal one. It was one of those journals you get from a therapist. 15 years ago, Taylor went on a weekend trip. One of the friends was the woman who led me to the journal. I remember that trip. Aaron flew over to join them halfway through and they stayed the rest of the week. But according to the journal, that's not why he flew over. On the second night, the girls were drugged and raped. It is unclear how many rapists there were. Taylor was the worst off. She had to go to the hospital. Aaron flew over as soon as the hospital contacted him. He never left her side. He helped her with her recovery. When they found out Taylor was pregnant, they decided not to do a test. Because right before she left, they made love. There was a chance Alice was his. They decided to raise Alice as his, choosing not to know. In her journal, Taylor expressed her shame for what happened. The trip was her idea. This was the reason none of us were made aware of the assault. She also expressed her love for Aaron for staying with her. Aaron brought her to therapy, showed her and their daughter love, and kept the secret. Taylor and Aaron died loving their daughter, without knowing she wasn't biologically his. I cried reading this. We all thought bad of Taylor, we were all wrong. I did tell my parents and showed them the journal. I don't know yet how we are going to navigate this with Alice. At the moment, she hates her mother, thinking she cheated. We can't have that, but how do we tell her to love her mother and not reveal what we know? How can we tell Alice she was the product of rape after the year she had? Alice was already seeing a therapist because of her experience in foster care. I have talked to the therapist to tell what we've learned. Alice is already doing better. We are going to follow the therapist's advice on how and when to talk to Alice about this. 2 days ago, I visited Taylor's grave. For over a year, I thought she was unfaithful to my brother. I owe her an apology. At her grave, I promised Taylor I will do anything in my power to raise Alice to become a woman she can be proud of. And I promised her that I will return with Alice, and she will love her mother again. I wasn't planning on writing again, but here we are. It has been a year since I adopted Alice, and I wanted to give an update. In short, she is doing well. A few weeks after we found out, we followed Alice's therapist's advice. We were all invited to therapy to tell her the truth. Alice was told that we would all be there and that it would possibly be a very emotional session. First, we had a talk about her year and how, despite everything, we never stopped loving her. She is now with us, and we will never leave her. Then it was time to tell her what we knew about her mother. I started talking, but I couldn't get the words out. The therapist wanted to take over, but I told her I would do it. Seeing me emotional, Alice became anxious and told me to just tell her. So I did. 15 years ago, your mother, she was raped. It took her a few seconds to process what I had just said. Alice started screaming, and I took her in my arms. She was uncontrollably crying and screaming. My parents held us, and we all cried together. After she calmed down, Alice asked us if her dad knew. She still calls Aaron her dad. We explained that he knew about the rape and that he knew there was a chance she wasn't his. We told her that he refused to take a paternity test because he loved her. We gave her all the relevant information and told her that when she was older, we would give her her mother's journal if she wanted to know more details. I kept her home that week. Throughout the week, she was emotionally volatile, switching between crying, anger, and silence. One moment she was angry with me for not telling her the truth sooner, the next moment she was emotionally crying, telling me she loved me and was grateful for everything I had done, and the next moment she was quietly withdrawn in her room. The poor girl had to deal with a whirlwind of emotions, and I was there for her every step of the way. I took her to the therapist 3 times that week. After a while, she started to ask me to talk about her parents, about what they were like when they were younger, and what they were like as new parents. Alice is not the happy girl she used to be yet, but we are making progress. A month after we told her, I got the chance to keep my promise to Taylor. Alice asked to see her mother's grave. It was an emotional day. At first, she was quietly staring at the headstone. And then, all of a sudden, she said, "I love you, Mom." That opened the floodgates for both of us. Ever since that day, it seems like a weight has been lifted off Alice's shoulders. She is more alive. She is becoming herself again. Alice, my niece, my adoptive daughter, is becoming Alice again. Story 3, I force my dying mother to pay me $200,000 every time I visit her. In most ways I had a pretty typical suburban upbringing. I was me, M31, my brother, M29, and my parents, F58 and M61. We grew up outside Chicago and were huge Michigan fans. Michigan football and the tennis Grand Slams were big in our house. If you wanted my dad's approval, and he was the man of the house, you played either football or tennis. Since both my parents were under 6 feet and not broad-shouldered, that basically meant tennis. I always liked tennis, but didn't love it. I preferred programming and video games. I played enough tennis to get good exercise and make the high school team. But my brother, he loved tennis and got good enough to get a scholarship. My father was so proud. While neither parent treated us poorly, my brother was clearly my father's favorite and I was clearly my mother's, who herself enjoyed video games and we could play for hours. One thing that did set us apart was money. Neither of my parents worked really. They would do odd jobs, mostly at the school or tennis clubs to keep close to us kids. That's because my maternal grandfather had left my mom and my 2 aunts a trust fund before he died. Not sure what it was when we were kids, but I know right now my mom's has over $12 million in it. My mom has taken some out over the years to buy the house and cars, but mostly they just live off the dividends, which are over 6 figures. The one stipulation is that only blood relatives are ever allowed to touch the trust. So my dad has no claim to it, but if my mom gives us permission, we could have our own. My mom has said she would give each of us our cut of the trust when we turn 30. As you know, I'm past 30 and never received mine. Well, for that story we have to go back to 2019. When I walked in on my fiancé, who I had been in a relationship with since my sophomore year at Michigan, and brother having sex. Apparently this had been going on for several months and they didn't know how to tell me. While I had a full-time job working for a tech company and also had just finished creating my own video game with a friend, my brother was a pro athlete on the tennis circuit. At the time of their affair, my brother was riding high after winning the Big Ten tennis championship his senior year and making it to the quarterfinals of the French Open his first year as a pro, where I must say he was defeated 6-0, 6-0, 6-0 by Nadal. Apparently that was enough for my fiancée to throw away an 8-year relationship. Off topic, but god damn it, fuck her. The fallout was initially pretty brutal for my brother. My mother lost it, calling him a disgrace and cutting him off. My father was more sympathetic but supported my mother initially. Being cut off killed my brother. He was living off their support to pay for his tennis training. This is important because not 3 months after this initial blow up, I get invited to a family dinner. Not unusual. But when I show up, it's my father, my father's brother and his wife, my mom, and my brother and ex-fiancé. I almost left right then, but my mother asked me to hear them out. My brother apologized for hurting me but told me he was in love and wanted to let me know that never meant to hurt me, but it just happened. My uncle then chimed in about how he and his wife made similar mistakes, but it's still the best thing that ever happened to both of them. My uncle's wife was married with someone else and they started as an affair. My dad said how important the family was and that we needed to stay together. He then looked at my brother and grabbed his shoulder. My brother looked at me triumphantly. He knew he had won. My mother had refused to make eye contact with me the whole time, but I looked at her and after being silent for all the speeches I asked her as she agreed. With a tear falling down her cheek she nodded yes. At that I said, well, I hope you all have a good life, but I won't be a part of it anymore. As I walked out the door, my father yelled that if I left I wouldn't get access to the trust. I looked at my mom and asked if this was true. She started crying but nodded and softly said, yes. I looked her directly in the eyes and said, I'll never forgive this betrayal. She started bawling but no one came after me. I hadn't heard or seen any of them until a month ago. 5 years of no contact. My aunt called and said my mother was in the hospital and desperately wanted to see me. I told her no and hung up. She called back several times in a row and on the 5th when I finally picked up and before I could tell her off she said my mom would wire transfer $100,000 into my account if I would meet with her. I countered at $200,000 and said I didn't want my father or brother there. She confirmed. The next day the bank called and got my info for the wire transfer, and once the $200,000 was in the account I called my aunt back and confirmed a time and place. I showed up at the hospital to find that my mother had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. The same shit her dad had. She looked awful. True to her word, my father and brother were not there. We talked for an hour. I told her about my life. I was working on a second video game. My first one had been sold to a distributor, had done good, not great, business, and they offered me a spot to work on a second game. I was doing well enough to own a family-sized condo where I lived with my girlfriend of 3 years who was pregnant with our first child. My mother was overjoyed. She tried to tell me about my father and brother, but I didn't want to hear it. At this point she broke down and told me letting me leave was the biggest mistake of her life. She cried for several minutes. A couple nurses had to come in and check on what was happening. She got so upset, and it only got worse when I told her that leaving the family was the best thing that I ever did and I had no intention of ever forgiving her. The shit they put me through and siding with my brother so quickly after he betrayed me wasn't worth $6 million. I went to walk out and she said she would do anything to rebuild the relationship. I told her the best I could do was $200,000 for every visit and no contact with my dad or brother. And I could meet twice a week for an hour, so $400,000 per week. She agreed, and in the past month I've made $1.6 million. I have no interest in forgiving anyone and don't plan on attending her funeral. But I will empty that trust and screw my father and brother. 2 hours in front of someone I hate a week is well worth their suffering. So it's been 9 months since I last posted. My mother died 3 weeks ago, about a month after my daughter was born. My mother was able to meet my daughter. I wanted to charge her $1 million for the privilege, but my girlfriend said no. Fair enough. Many asked what my girlfriend thought of my charges, and while she thought it was a bit cruel, she was also cheated on. We actually met here on Reddit in the Surviving Infidelity sub, and understood my position. She also softened when she realized almost all of it was going into a trust for our children that even I couldn't touch. Don't want what happened to me to happen to my children. Don't even trust myself here. Overall, I visited my mom 53 times and received $10.8 million. Between that and her medical bills, the trust is less than $200,000 in it. She died just in time. She couldn't afford me anymore. True to my word, I did not attend her funeral or the reading of the will. I am upset about that. It appears to have not gone well since I received calls from lawyer threatening to sue me for taking advantage of a dying mother. But I have my ducks in a row. She signed it all away and was in her right mind. Well, right mind-ish. She was still reeling from the consequences of her decisions. My brother's wife is screaming at me, and from the texts I don't think it's even my ex-fiancé, which is hysterical. She must have left him when his tennis career fell apart. He hasn't even made a grand slam since before COVID. Love my ass. My dad has tried to find me and called me from a bunch of random numbers and left voicemails. They range from blinding range to pleading. Without that trust he has nothing. No career, no 401k, no pension. He'll be working until he dies. Probably at McDonald's. That's about his skill level. Actually, that's offensive to food service workers. My dad has never worked that hard a day in his life. He's not even at that skill level. My lawyer thinks with how desperate they are, I might be able to get them to sign something that promises not to sue in exchange for $200,000 each. Which would just be chef's kiss wonderful in a way that they won't even understand. I've told him to go ahead with the offer and see if they accept. Though most is going in the trust, I did buy a ring for my girlfriend and bought her a nicer condo in Lincoln Park where she's always wanted to live. I also paid someone to send my dad random Ohio State jerseys with his name on the back for the next 3 years just to fuck with him. I think this will be my last update. Hope all of you are doing well, and remember, always be petty after a betrayal. Story 4. I caught my wife having an affair with her brother. I've been married to my soon-to-be ex-wife for 5 years, but I have been dating her for the past 8, and I never would have thought that something this crazy would happen to me. So my wife, 43 female, and I, 44 male, have been together and inseparable for as long as I know. We met at a bar after a night shift as a nurse and we instantly clicked. My wife hasn't been able to get pregnant since she has a condition called endometriosis, which she's had for her whole life. She's always been really insecure of it and has told me to leave her multiple times since I've always wanted a big family, but it didn't matter to me. This past spring has been very revealing of this whole situation, and I just can't believe that she's done this to me. My wife has a brother, 38 male, and me and him both got along pretty well and bonded over a love for fishing and hunting. He had his own wife and kids, and I just don't understand why he had to ruin mine. I'm a constructor and I took a job out of the city that would have taken 3 weeks, then I'd be able to go home. My wife was fine with it, and even though she'd usually come with me for these long trips, she wanted to stay home and take care of the dogs, which seems pretty normal. I left for my job, but about 2 days into my trip, I had realized that I forgot my meds and I had to go back, which was alright and wouldn't disturb any of the work. I didn't tell my wife that I was coming back because I wanted to surprise her. I got home around 11 p.m. and I was surprised to see her brother's car in the driveway since he was supposed to be at the hospital with his wife who was in labor, but maybe he had forgotten something from her last meetup. So I went in and the lights were off, so my wife was probably asleep in our room, but I didn't see her brother, which was odd, but maybe he came and crashed in the guest room. I went to my room and I saw the two together in bed. Their clothes were on the floor, a bottle of wine was on the coffee table, and the picture of us at our wedding was face down on the side table along with her ring next to it. This was insane, and so I immediately started yelling at the two. My wife and her lover woke up and started rummaging around looking for their clothes, which was just scattered all over. She tried to apologize and wanted to talk to me, but I was in disbelief. My brother-in-law was putting on his shorts and tried to calm me down, but that just made it worse, so I took my dogs and booked a room at a motel in town. My wife was blowing up my phone with apologies and asks for forgiveness, but when I finally responded, it was of me demanding a divorce. Update. I've been talking to my lawyer and it's settled. In taking the house, the car, and the dogs, and she'll get half of the money in the bank account. She'll be staying with her ancestral family a couple states west and she won't be any of my problem. I don't know when I'll start dating again or if I ever will because of my brand new trust issues from that previous event, but I'll go where the future takes me. Update again. As of now, I am a single man. The divorce isn't fully complete, but I'm never going to see that woman ever again. It's upsetting that she's getting half my hard-earned cash, but at least I'm keeping the money-consuming dogs. I'm not alone in this, although, since her brother did have a wife and kids, we've been supporting each other throughout this whole situation. I'm on dating apps and I met this young woman. She's great. My mom thinks it's a bit early for me to be dating again, but I'm sure the woman is still boning her brother, so why don't I get in on some action too? That's all for now, but I might update later. Story 5, the family reunion didn't go as planned. I, am 18, Lee, grew up more or less an only child. My parents, 59M and 59F, are the most loving and the most awesome people I've ever met in my life. I wish I could say they have flaws, but in my eyes, they don't. They are there for me when I need them. We laugh about stupid stuff, we have private jokes. When I am down, they find a way to make me feel better. Even when we fight, we patch things up extremely quickly with hugs and conversations. I spend weekends camping with my mom, and every other night I'll be cooking with my dad. They wanted me to know that gender roles didn't exist in our household. Everything you could ask for in a parent, they were it. I have 3 older half-siblings, M33, F36, and F38. Let's call them John, Kelly, and Donna. I have extremely vague memories about them. I remember John spending time at home for a while, but then he disappeared. Kelly and Donna were never there. But we talk about them all the time. They are my dad's kids with his first wife, Nayla, who passed away from before I was born, unfortunately. My mom talks a lot about her. She's so respectful about her. When I would be disrespectful about Nayla, my mom would get mad at me and tell me to be respectful and loving towards her. But I've seen pictures. The 3 of them don't look like me at all. But they're always smiling in the pictures. Their mom is also there in the pictures. She's so beautiful. I might even say that she's way more beautiful than my mom. Their mom was black and my parents are white, if that matters. My siblings are some of the most beautiful people I've ever seen too. I am extremely insecure about how I look compared to them. Donna, the oldest, is darker but has gray eyes and gray hair. She looks like a real-life storm. Kelly has a smile that could seduce even the meanest person on earth, and John just has so much charisma. I could never compare with my mid-looks. They're not perfect but so beautiful and so accomplished. In some ways, I'm glad I didn't grow up with them being present in my life. My parents always told me that they loved me but thought that bonding with his new family felt like betraying their mom, so that's why they're not part of our life at the moment. I never asked any more questions. Every Christmas, birthday, or important milestone, I would receive a heartfelt letter and money from each of them. They loved me and I loved them back and couldn't wait to finally meet them. I thought that when I would turn 18, I would come looking for them and we would be reunited. And that's what my parents told me too. That they respected Nayla, Kelly, John, and Donna too much but hoped that we would all be a family the moment I would become an adult and be free of my parents' authority. That's how I grew up. My parents kept up with their lives and so did I. When Kelly was promoted to an executive job at her Fortune 5 company, I was so proud and jokingly thought that she could help me get an internship somewhere maybe. When Donna sold her first, second, 10th and 50th artwork at an art gallery, I celebrated at dinner with Mom and Dad. When John started working at La Sorbonne in Paris, I bragged to my friends in high school because who doesn't want a sibling who lives in France in their family? I was never gifted like them, so my siblings' accomplishments were a way to make myself look better to outside people, and that was enough for me. They all studied at prestigious universities or colleges, have great diplomas, and seem to have great lives. I have to admit I'm jealous of them. But still, I couldn't wait for my 18th birthday, not only because I would become an adult, but also because I could reunite with my siblings that I had missed and who had missed not only me but also each other. Because my parents also told me that after leaving them, Kelly, John and Donna parted ways because it hurt them too much to look at each other after their mom's passing. I turned 18 3 weeks ago. I found Kelly's address from my dad's contact book. Well, I went to meet Kelly 3 days ago, and I'm on a train back home to my parents right now with new information that I wasn't prepared for. I do not know what to do anymore. Thanks to the person who told me to check my writing. I was so scared to post, so I pressed post a little too fast. I will try to better check. So, I am back. I have been locked in my room for a week and I don't even know where to start. After reading everything I have to say, you will all wonder why I didn't look for answers. Why didn't I ask more questions? It's simple. I trusted my parents. I love them and I would never even imagine that they would lie about something like that. It would be way too big of a lie. No way they would lie like this. I think I was also scared about finding out a truth that I didn't want to hear. But my parents, my dad especially, are two sick fucks. Let's go back to when I arrived at Kelly's house. I took a cab from the bus station and I started having an anxiety attack because who shows up to someone's place without warning after not seeing them for so long? I ended up with my bag in front of the house. And I started crying and hyperventilating. I probably looked like a complete lunatic. The only thing that stopped my attack was a woman yelling my name, asking if I was okay and what I was doing there. I turned around and saw Donna, which confused me. Because, wasn't this Kelly's house? Were they not supposed to have parted ways after their mom's death? It started to get extremely confusing to me. Donna was extremely sweet though. She sat down outside with me, made small talk and asked me about my life. She took me in her arms when I started to calm down. She was so motherly and reassuring. We then sat there in silence for what felt like hours. She finally asked me why I was there. I needed to vent. So I just went for it. I went on a rant that probably lasted half an hour. Everything I said in my first post and more. I told her my entire life story. It was like word vomit. I couldn't stop myself. And Donna was nice enough to let me talk, but her face went from concern to excuse me, to WTF. When I was finally done, she dramatically yelled, "What the hell?" She just had time to tell me that her mom actually died when I was 3 or 4, and the reason I remembered John was because he handled her affairs after her passing, and since she was my godmother, first time I heard about that, she had left some stuff to me in her will. Coincidentally, Kelly, John and an older gentleman arrived at the same time. John and Kelly looked happy to see me, surprised, but still happy. They both hugged me and asked what I was doing there. They also asked Donna why she didn't tell them about my coming to see them. She said that she didn't know, I just showed up, and she didn't have time to warn them. That's when John turned to the older men and enthusiastically said 10 words I will never forget. "Dad, this is Lee. Lee, this is our dad, Winston. Dad, this is Lee. Lee, this is our dad, Winston." This sentence will forever be ingrained in my brain. Nothing I've been through before that will ever compare. And I doubt anything will compare in the future. I felt like I was going to pass out. What did he mean, our dad? So many questions were running through my mind. When he said, our dad, did that include me? Is my dad not my dad? But no. Because Winston is black too and I'm definitely white. Was my dad just a sperm donor for the 3 of them? Did Nayla have them be adopted by this Winston guy? Did they abduct them to play happy family away from us? What was happening? I was so out of it, I barely noticed Kelly calling someone and then a man coming out of the house to take the dad inside. Donna started whispering stuff to them. I'm assuming she recapped everything I told her because John and Kelly also started looking at me funny. I remember screaming, I need answers. Now. So we all sat down on the ground and they told me everything they knew. I will try to separate their story in comprehensive parts because it doesn't even make sense to me right now. Everything I will tell is what they told me and more, so I don't know if it's all true. But I believe them. First of all, I am not their brother and they're not my siblings. We are not even related at all. Their mom. Nayla. Nayla Johnson, I'm giving her a last name, it will be easier for what is coming next. Let's also call my dad Phil because I don't even know who he is anymore. Nayla and Phil were childhood best friends. Their parents were neighbors who became good friends. My dad is an only child but Nayla had an older brother, Carl, and a younger sister, Bonnie. They're both still alive. What's funny is the fact that the age difference between the three of them is the same as the age difference between Donna, Kelly, and John. My grandparents could only have one child, so they pushed for Nayla and her siblings to hang out with him. Her parents saw nothing wrong with it. After all, it was just one more friend for their children. They loved and trusted my grandparents, so it was a win-win for everyone. When either family needed anything, they were there for each other. My grandmother is actually Bonnie's godmother, which will explain a lot. Nayla and Phil went to school together, played together. Nayla's parents helped them with their homework, introduced them to poetry and journaling. My grandfather would teach them piano. Phil and Carl would play soccer together. They were family friends. And at this point I could only ask them, how do you even know all of that? Did your mom tell you? And they just laughed and said, yes, she did tell us some of it. But didn't you listen to the part where we said that our grandparents introduced them to journaling? Our mom and Phil both took to it and had journals. Your dad probably did it because he wanted to impress our mom though. We got our moms when she died and we also got copies of your dad's and the stuff she left. They didn't want to talk about the journals in detail yet, but I got to read everything after our conversation. And part of the story is based on what I've read from them. The issue is, as I said in my first post, Nayla was extremely beautiful, even as a child apparently. Not only that, she was smart, well-spoken but very quiet compared to her siblings. She liked cooking, taking care of others and listening to what they had to say. So my grandparents thought she would make a great wife. They started filling my dad's head with delusions of them being meant for each other, and that when time would come, they would become a couple. It started before they were 10. And my dad fed on it. He developed an unhealthy attachment to her. He was obsessed with her. But they told him to never speak on it until she was ready because she was shy. Donna seemed to want me to know how shy their mother was even as a full-grown adult but still assertive when she needed to be. So Phil and Nayla went to the same university and he tried to ask her out a couple times but she always refused. And what's confusing to me is the fact that he didn't ask more. But based on his journals, he was scared of losing her so he backed off and was sure that she would come back to him. They met a bunch of people who became their friends at uni and that's when they met the woman who would become his first wife. Readers, if you're confused by this statement, so was I. Because I'd never heard of any first wife, other than Nayla. Well, this woman, Tracy, was part of Dad and Nayla's friend group and she had a huge crush on him. Nayla pushed her to ask him out to get him off her back. Because she still saw him as her best friend and thought he just needed the right woman. She knew she wasn't it though. Let's remember, at that point, she still thought that he just had an unrequited crush on her. She didn't know about the obsession. He was great at hiding it. My dad finally agreed to go out with Tracy when Nayla met Winston and they became serious really fast. I will not talk about their love story here because it's between the two of them, but it's extremely beautiful. So Nayla and Winston got serious. They would double date with Phil and Tracy. They apparently had such a great time. They did everything together. Classes, bungee jumping, amusement parks, travels. Everything you could ask for. They did it as a group. Phil and Winston would go out for drinks and write poetry for their ladies. Nayla and Tracy would go golfing and go to cooking classes. They didn't just like each other as couples, they individually became friends. Nayla thought my dad was over her. But he wasn't. At all. She got pregnant with Donna at 21 and that prompted Winston to propose to her. He had already decided to enlist and join the army before that, so the pregnancy rushed things a little bit. They wanted to make it official and they were crazy in love, so why the hell not, like Kelly said. 3 days after they announced their engagement, Dad and Tracy announced their engagement. Nayla thought that was weird, But Tracy was so elated that she just celebrated the engagement with all of their friends. That's when Dad's crazy side started to show a little. He said that they should have a joint engagement party. Winston and Nayla weren't sure, but at the time, my grandparents were wealthier and could pay for more, so it made sense. My grandparents weren't too happy about either engagements and talked about it with the Johnsons. But the Johnsons just wanted their daughter to be happy. Their son, Carl, had just come out as gay and was still in the closet to the rest of the world. So, even though they weren't bothered by that, they still wanted a public celebration of love for one of their kids and honestly didn't really care about the whole meant-to-be thing or just didn't know. So my grandparents agreed. Still hoping that Nayla would come to her senses at some point. As far as Donna, John, and Kelly know, the engagement party was like a fairy tale. Everything went smoothly. Everyone had a great time. Speeches were made, the engaged couple seemed so ecstatic. People danced, ate, and laughed. It was a complete success. Towards the end of the night, Tracy took Nayla aside and told her, "I'm so happy to have had this joint engagement party with you. You've always been such an amazing friend, you pushed me to ask him out when I was so insecure, and thought the two of you would end up together. But not only do we have this party together, we are also pregnant at the same time. Phil and I are expecting." "What do you mean expecting?" "I have a half-sibling that I never knew about." "Well, surprise, surprise, I actually have 3. 2 half-brothers and a half-sister." Turns out, each time Winston and Nayla announced a pregnancy, my dad and Tracy found a way to get pregnant. I guess my dad was just as sick as his parents. And Tracy was trying to prove that she was as great as Nayla, her best friend. So my half-siblings would have been 38F, Marina, 35M, Simon, and 32M, Robert, today. I am amazed by these people being able to just pop out kids at will because I've read way too many stories about people battling with infertility over here. Unfortunately, they are all dead. I know I seem indifferent to this news. But these are people I never met or knew. I didn't even know they existed. I just need some time to adjust. But after reading my dad's journals, I know that, had they not died, he was going to try to have them get married to Nayla's kids. 2 boys and a girl on one side and 2 girls and a boy on the other. The math was perfect. Before I come back to their story, I will answer some questions you probably have, and that I had too. I asked them these questions before they could tell me anything else. 1. To why she didn't tell me about my actual siblings right away. Donna said, "Dude, I literally found you on the front lawn screaming and crying like crazy. Even though we've corresponded, I don't really know you. I didn't know how you would react. And ain't no way I would tell you the truth about your dad without any backup. I have a husband and kids, I don't need to die right now." Which makes sense. I did look like a lunatic at that point. 2. To why they never told me they weren't my siblings. John said, "Before today, we didn't know that it was what you were told. This is literally news to me. I don't know for my sisters, but I never referred to you as my brother in my letters. And you never referred to me as yours. So, at no point did I assume that was the way you saw me or us. We might have used the term family, but since you're our mother's godson, it made sense. Also, I never call my sisters to their faces, unless we're arguing about something. I feel thwarted and need to remember them of who we are to each other. And you and I never argued." Donna and Kelly agreed. And thinking about it, it's true we used family, but nothing else. Because when you're siblings, you don't need to remind each other of that. You just know it. And I, foolishly, knew they were my siblings. 3. To why they weren't more present in my life. They all agreed on the fact that they saw my dad as extremely unstable and a menace. Kelly said, "The way our parents talked about your dad and their history was so weird. Our mom was a people pleaser and her parents kept reminding her of everything your grandparents had done for their family. Dad wasn't the biggest fan of Phil but made the effort of getting to know him to keep the peace. But he always set boundaries and kept Phil at arm's length. They became friends, yes, but we always felt like it was fake and that he just wanted to keep our mother safe. So we grew up with Phil being part of our lives. He was nice and never hurt us, so our parents didn't cut him out because Phil never gave them any reason to do so. He was there for most of our childhood, but when we were old enough to forge our own opinions, we decided to just keep our distance. We also went to university and college. Donna went to Yale, John and I moved abroad to study at La Sorbonne in Oxford. So we didn't really have time to keep up with you and visit. 4. To why they still kept in touch even though they didn't have time to keep up with me. Donna said, when you were born, our mom asked us to look after you, because of the family history and her being your godmother. She wanted us to be like older cousins who could advise you and help you in any way you needed. You were just a baby, so we had no reason to say no. We were already clashing with mom about your dad. But you were innocent, so we agreed. Had mom not died, we would have done it too. But when she left us, we really wanted to honor her wishes. So we sent you letters and money because that's all we could do. 5. To how my dad was able to make me believe that Nayla was his first wife, because I had all these pictures of them together. Donna was so aggressive about it. She was crying when she said this. Do you have any pictures of our mom and your dad kissing, or being romantic in any way? No. Because our parents and Phil and Tracy spent so much time together, they double dated, they went on vacations together, they did everything together. Do you think that there were only pictures of just our mom and your dad together? When she gave birth, your parents were there. When Tracy gave birth, our parents were there. Weddings, parties, any milestones, they were there together. Your half-siblings and us were actually friends. We liked them very much. Hell, at some point, when we were 14/15, your sister and I would lock ourselves in our rooms to kiss and stuff. Tracy and Phil were there for our milestones and our parents for theirs. Our dad was also in the military for a long time, so he wasn't always there for stuff. But for every pictures of our mom with your dad, there were as many with our dad and Tracy. Or our dad with your dad. Or our mom and Tracy. 6. To how Tracy died, they all looked at each other in silence, and were trying to hold back tears. Kelly finally mustered the strength to say, all you need to know right now, is the fact that when she left, she was surrounded by the people she loved the most, her children. At this point we were all exhausted and we went in the house. A lot of people were there. I officially met their spouses. Donna's husband was actually the one to come and get Winston earlier, and their kids. Winston was sitting on a chair, sleeping. Other people were in the garden. 2 older adults came to greet us and introduced themselves as Carl and Bonnie, Nayla's siblings. You should have seen their face when John told them why was. Bonnie started crying and Carl screamed at them, you brought the kid of the son of a bitch who killed our sister here. Your own mother. Around our family. TW, deaf in labor/death during a natural disaster. Before I go further, for this part, it's important for me to tell you this. The events I'm recounting happened in my family, in real life, and the emotions of the characters for this part are actually mine. I witnessed that as a kid and young adult. The family members know that I'm writing this story, just so you don't think I'm being disrespectful to people who also went through these types of events. Back to the story. Oh my God, Carl. The kid didn't do anything. Leave him alone, Donna screamed. Well, his dad was responsible, wasn't he? Carl answered. Donna went away to take care of the kids. She's really like her mom. That's sweet. But nobody wanted to talk, they were there for their weekly family lunch, and didn't expect my visit, so it was way too much in one sitting. Bonnie asked me if I really didn't know what happened. I told her that, except from what I was just told, no. I didn't know anything. John begged them to tell me, because they were tired and didn't have the strength to keep reopening old wounds. So, here I was, left in a kitchen with 2 people who clearly hated me. Where was I? Yes. My dad's first kids. Someone on my first post assumed that Donna, Kelly, and John would hate me and wanted nothing to do with me. Well, they were right in the sense that Marina, Simon and Robert, my actual siblings, did actually hate the thought of me existing. They refused to interact with me in any way. They refused to acknowledge me, hold me, play with me. Anything. And when I was born, they were either adults, or almost out of the house. You see, Phil and Tracy got a divorce when the kids were preteens/teenagers and Phil met my mom extremely quickly, there was no cheating, and they got married fast. Because my dad was always at work, and he needed someone to take care of the kids when they weren't with Tracy. She wasn't allowed full custody, so they had to live with my dad and my mom. Apparently, my mom said that it was love at first sight for her, and I get it. Do you know why Dad and Tracy got a divorce? Because she found his journals detailing how crazy in love he was with Nayla and that he regretted not only getting married to the wrong woman, but having kids that weren't Nayla's. That's the reason he was so present in D, J, and K's life. Sorry, I'm using initials, it's faster to type. Since their dad was still in the military at that point, he hoped he could take his place as a paternal figure. Which never worked, of course, but still. After the divorce, Tracy sent a bunch of files to Nayla, titled, "In Case Anything Happens to Me." She didn't say anything else because Nayla was an amazing friend and a great presence in her kids' lives, and she didn't want to lose that. Nayla was still present in my dad's life, because after the divorce, she wanted to keep an eye on the children, when Tracy wasn't around, especially Robert and Simon. Hence, more pictures with my dad, K, D, and J. You know what the worst part in all of this is? I do remember seeing some photos with 3 other kids I didn't know. But they were neighborhood kids, according to my dad. How sick is that? Calling your own children neighborhood kids. What kept her there was also the fact that she was my godmother, and she was worried for my mom because she could feel that my dad was not right in the head. Kelly finally came back with a photo album full of pictures from their childhood. Some of them included my siblings. And I could tell they were my siblings. I look almost identical to Robert. I felt connected to them. She said that the stuff their mom left me was actually a box of trinkets, memories, and letters to remember my siblings by. But my dad has it, so I don't know where it is. Probably went into the trash a long time ago. When I was 2 years old and Robert turned 16 in December 2004, Tracy took him, Marina, and Simon on a trip to Indonesia. It was both a birthday and a Christmas gift. The tsunami took them. They never returned. My dad didn't really care that much, unfortunately. He had a new wife and me already. Again, sick fuck. But Nayla, Winston, and their kids looked for them for so long, hoping they had survived. But they didn't. They buried empty caskets. They grieved and tried to move on. Nayla then opened the "In Case Anything Happens to Me" files and read everything. It was my father's journals. She decided to cut ties with him then and there. But still asked her children to look after me from afar. Winston also decided that it was time to retire from the military and got a good job at a security company or something. I don't really understand all the details. After that, life resumed. But, surprise, 2 years later, Nayla got pregnant again. It wasn't planned. But the family was still ecstatic about it. When he found out, my dad lost it. He became depressed. He would snap at my mom, completely ignore me. 3 weeks before Nayla was supposed to give birth, he showed up to her place and confessed his feelings, everything. He told her he was tired of her making him wait. But Nayla already knew all of that, because of the journals. They got into a screaming match that got physical. My dad pushed her on the ground because he was blinded by so much rage and left in a hurry. Nayla thought she was okay and foolishly didn't go to a doctor. She told Winston what had happened. Winston then showed up to my parents' place and told them to stay away from his family or there would be consequences. Unfortunately, Nayla should have gone to a doctor. Because the day after that, she started bleeding and went into early labor, but unfortunately, it was too late. Apparently they did everything they could. The family prayed to every god possible. But there was no miracle. She didn't survive and neither did the baby. At that point D, K, and J were back with their respective spouses. A woman, who I assumed was Kelly's wife, said that we should come eat because it was enough for now. A kid took my hand and I followed him. That's it for now because I'm exhausted. I can hear my parents knocking at my door to talk about this, but I'm not done telling this story, so they'll have to wait. F these people. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and hit that subscribe button to follow Cheating Love Stories for more amazing videos. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.